They laughed at me in the lawyer's office. My brother got the company. My sister got the houses. I got a locked metal box with no key. 6 months later, they were calling me nonstop. My name is Evan Cole. And this is the story of how being ignored saved my life, and how the people who thought they won everything never realized the ground under them was already cracking. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and expensive coffee. The kind of place where money had been arguing with money for decades. My grandfather, Harold Cole, built a logistics empire from a single rented truck. Cole Freight Systems, warehouses, contracts, government clients. And now he was dead. I stood near the back wall, hands folded, wearing the same navy jacket I'd worn to my job interview the week before. Still had the tag inside the pocket. I hadn't bothered cutting it off. Across the room sat my siblings. Mark, my older brother, leaned back like the chair belonged to him already. Custom suit, gold watch, smiling before the will was even opened. Samantha, my sister, tapped on her phone, probably replying to congratulations that hadn't happened yet. She never looked up unless something benefited her. Their spouses hovered close. Everyone already dividing the future in their heads. And then there was me. 32 years old. Public school teacher. Drove in from Cleveland in a 12-year-old Toyota with a cracked dashboard. No one asked how I was doing. That wasn't new. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Cole was very specific, he said. He revised this will personally. No changes were made after. Mark smiled wider. Let's get on with it, he said. We all know how this goes. The lawyer nodded and began reading. Mark received controlling interest in Cole Freight Systems. He stood immediately. I'll honor the legacy, he said, already practicing the speech he'd give to employees. Samantha received 3 residential properties, including the lake house. She gasped dramatically. I knew Grandpa loved me. Their spouses exchanged looks that said we're set. Then the lawyer paused. He turned toward me. Evan Cole, he said, adjusting his glasses, you receive this. He slid a small metal box across the desk. No ribbon. No explanation, just a dull gray container about the size of a lunchbox. The room went silent. Then Mark laughed. That's it, he said. A toolbox. Samantha lifted her phone. Oh my God, this is actually sad. Someone snorted. I picked up the box. Heavy. Cold. No keyhole. What's inside? Mark asked. The lawyer shook his head. Mr. Cole left no instructions beyond this. Give Evan the box. Nothing more. Samantha leaned forward. Did he forget the rest? She asked. Was this some mistake? No, the lawyer said calmly. There are no mistakes in this document. Mark waved his hand. Fine. Evan always liked puzzles. He leaned back, satisfied. The meeting ended 5 minutes later. They left with smiles and handshakes. I left with a box I couldn't open. In the parking lot. Mark clapped me on the shoulder. Hey, he said, almost kindly. You always wanted to be different. Guess you got your wish. Samantha laughed. Maybe there's a coupon inside, she said. Or a note that says, good luck. I didn't respond. I put the box in my back seat and drove home. 3 hours of silence. 3 hours of wondering what kind of joke my grandfather had played. Monday morning came like it always did. 6:00 a.m. cheap alarm. Coffee from a cracked mug.my apartment heater rattled like it might die any second. At school, my students complained about homework and argued about lunch. Normal problems. I like that. Teaching history kept things grounded. Facts didn't lie. Timelines made sense. During my lunch break, I opened my bank app. 1/9/12. Rent due in 10 days. I stared at the metal box sitting beside my desk. Still locked. Still silent. Still heavy. People saw my grandfather as ruthless. But that wasn't the man I knew. He was quiet. Observant. Uncomfortable with praise. He only ever talked to me when no one else was around. You listen more than you talk, he once said. That's why people underestimate you. I didn't know if it was a compliment. Now I wondered if it was a warning. 3 weeks later, Mark called. Not to check on me, to ask a question. Hey, he said, voice tight. Did Grandpa ever mention a secondary account? I paused. No, I said. Why? Just asking, he replied quickly. Accounting stuff. The line went dead. I looked at the box. For the first time, I noticed something strange on the bottom, scratched faintly into the metal, where four letters point R point T point S point L point, no explanation. Just that. That night, I sat on my couch, turning the box over in my hands. Everyone thought I'd been forgotten, but my grandfather never forgot anything. And for the first time since the funeral, I realized something terrifying. The box wasn't a gift, that it was a test. The box sat on my kitchen table for 4 days before I touched it again, not because I was afraid of what was inside, because something told me opening it was the wrong move. Why grandfather never did anything directly. He believed real lessons required patience. That box wasn't locked to keep something in. It was locked to slow me down. The first call came from Samantha. She didn't say hello. "Evan," she said, "did Grandpa ever talk to you about offshore accounts?" No, silence. Then she hung up. 2 hours later, Mark texted, "You wouldn't happen to know the password to his old email, would you?" I didn't reply. That I wasn't being petty. I was paying attention, because when people who once laughed at you suddenly need you, it's never about missing you. It's about losing control. At school, I kept teaching like nothing had changed, that we were covering the Great Depression. I talked about speculation, leverage, and collapse. My students thought it was ancient history. I knew better. That Friday, I skipped dinner and walked 3 blocks to the public library. Not for books, for records. The letters on the bottom of the box kept circling in my head. R.T.S.L. I tried business filings, property databases, old trucking permits. Nothing. Then I changed tactics. I looked up my grandfather's early life, before the company, before the money. That's when I found it. A defunct corporation registered in Ohio in 1978. Ridgeway Transportation and Storage Limited. R.T.S.L. The address was a warehouse district outside Toledo. The company dissolved in the early 90s. No press, no lawsuits, no bankruptcy, just vanished. I printed everything. The next morning, I drove to Toledo. The warehouse still stood, weathered brick, boarded windows, a faded sign barely visible under layers of paint. I parked across the street and waited. I didn't know why, but I remembered something my grandfather once said while watching people in a room. "Truth doesn't rush," he told me. "It lets you come to it." After 20 minutes, a man in his late 60s unlocked the side door. Gray hair, work boots, careful movements. I crossed the street. "Excuse me," I said. "Did you ever work for Harold Cole?" The man studied my face, then nodded. "Depends who's asking." "His grandson." The man exhaled slowly. "Well," he said, unlocking the door wider. "Guess it's about time then." Inside, the warehouse was empty except for dust and memory. He introduced himself as Raymond, former operations manager. "Your grandfather ran 2 companies," he said. "Everyone knew about the big one." He pointed at the walls. "This one existed for a different reason." "For what?" I asked. Raymond smiled without humor. "To clean messes." He explained it plainly. When contracts went bad, when partners cut corners, when someone inside the family made reckless decisions. R.T.S.L. absorbed the damage quietly, bought failing assets, moved debt, restructured losses. No press, no glory, just stability. "Your uncle knew about it," Raymond said, "but he didn't control it." "Who did?" I asked. Raymond looked at me. "Your grandfather. Alone." On the way back to Cleveland, my phone rang again. Mark. This time, he didn't pretend. "We're in trouble," he said. "Real trouble." I stayed silent. "The company's bleeding cash," he continued. "Deals Grandpa approved don't make sense. The numbers don't match." "Then why did you sign off on them?" I asked. Another pause. "Because power without understanding always assumes someone else built the bridge." That night, I finally examined the box again. I wasn't looking for a key. I was looking for intent. Inside the bottom lining, I felt something shift. A false panel. I pressed. It slid open. No gold. No documents. Just a USB drive and a folded note. One sentence. "If they're calling you, you're ready." I didn't plug the drive in right away. I waited until Sunday. Because rushing had never been my role. When I finally opened the files, I understood everything. The box wasn't inheritance. It was responsibility. And the people who thought they'd won were standing on a structure they didn't even know existed. Point one, they had already started to destroy. That night, Mark left a voicemail. His voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Evan," he said, "we need to talk. Please." I looked at the screen, then at the files, then back at the box. For the first time, I understood why my grandfather trusted me. Because I never reached for power, and power hates that I didn't return Mark's call that night. Not because I was angry. Because once people panic, they start telling the truth without being asked. By Monday morning, I had 6 missed calls. Point three from Mark, 2 from Samantha, 1 from a number I didn't recognize. That I went to work anyway. That I taught my classes. I graded essays. I explained to a room full of teenagers how systems collapse when the wrong people are put in charge. None of them realized I was speaking from experience. The USB drive stayed in my jacket pocket all day. That I didn't open it again. That I already knew enough. That L wasn't a safety net. That IT was a mirror. That IT showed exactly how much damage my family had been hiding behind confidence and titles. The unknown number called again during my drive home. That I answered. "This is Evan." "Mr. Cole," a man said calmly. "My name is Daniel Hargreave. I represent First Continental Lending." I slowed the car. "Why are you calling me?" There was a pause. "Because," he said carefully, "your grandfather listed you as the final authorization contact for several dormant accounts." Final, not secondary, not emergency. Final. They've been activated, he continued, due to breaches in loan covenants by Cole Freight Systems. I said nothing. "Frankly," Hargreave added, "we were surprised to hear from you instead of your brother." "So was he," I said. That evening, Mark showed up at my apartment unannounced in a suit. No confidence, just a man who had run out of places to hide. "You knew," he said as soon as I opened the door. "I knew Grandpa planned," I replied. "There's a difference." He stepped inside, looking around like he was seeing my life for the first time. "This place," he said quietly. "You really live like this?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "The lenders are circling," he said. "They froze credit lines. Clients are nervous. The board wants answers." "You're the CEO," I said. "Give them some." Mark laughed once. "IT sounded hollow. He built it so we'd fail, didn't he?" "No," I said. "He built it so only the right person could hold it." Mark looked up. "And that's you?" I met his eyes. "That depends on what you do next." The next day, Samantha called. She didn't yell. She didn't joke. She cried. "They're foreclosing," she said. "I didn't even know the houses were leveraged." "They weren't," I replied, "until you needed more." Silence again. "I don't want money," she said quickly. "I just want stability." I almost smiled. Almost. By Wednesday, the story hit internal channels. Not the news. Not yet. But employees knew something was wrong. Late payments. Canceled shipments. Sudden audits. I received an email from the board. A formal request. They wanted a meeting. Not with Mark. With me. I agreed on one condition. No lawyers. No press. No speeches. Just facts. The room was tense when I walked in. Executives who'd never noticed me before suddenly knew my name. I placed the metal box on the table, didn't open it, didn't need to. "Cole Freight Systems doesn't need saving," I said. "It needs honesty." I laid out the truth, the hidden debt, the inflated projections, the deals made to look powerful instead of sustainable. No accusations, just consequences. When I finished, no one spoke. Finally, one board member asked the question they'd been avoiding. "What do you want, Evan?" I thought about my classroom. My students. My life. "I want the bleeding to stop," I said. "And I want people who build things to stay." They exchanged looks. Mark stared at the table. The vote happened 2 days later. Mark resigned. Officially by choice. Samantha sold one property to cover immediate losses. The board appointed an interim CEO. Not me. Someone boring. Someone careful. Exactly what the company needed. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the box on the table, the USB drive beside it. My phone buzzed. A message from Raymond in Toledo. "Your grandfather always said the last move isn't about winning. It's about balance." I looked around. Nothing about my life looked powerful. but everything felt steady, and for the first time, I understood the real lesson. Power doesn't fall in explosions, the IT collapses quietly when it's built on ego. And the people who survive are the ones who never needed the spotlight in the first place. The company stabilized without me stepping into any spotlight. That was the point that I stayed in my classroom while Coal Freight Systems quietly corrected itself. Routes were cut, contracts renegotiated. Executives who chased optics instead of margins were replaced, no headlines. No applause, just work. Mark moved out of his downtown condo and into a rented townhome near the office. He called once a week, not to ask for help. To talk about pressure, about fear, about how pretending to be in control had exhausted him. I don't know who I am without the title, he admitted one night. That I understood. Titles do that. Samantha surprised me. She sold the remaining properties on her own, paid what she owed, took a marketing job with a mid-sized firm. Not glamorous, but real. She sent me a text one afternoon that I didn't know how much weight I was carrying until it was gone. That I didn't reply. Some lessons don't need responses. The metal box went back into my closet, empty now. Its purpose finished. That I never mentioned it publicly. Never used it to claim authority. Because my grandfather hadn't given me power, he'd given me perspective. To AT school, my students asked why I seemed lighter. That I told them history had finally made sense. That systems don't fail because of bad luck. They fail because of bad choices repeated too long. And that real leadership looks boring when it's done right. One afternoon, a letter arrived at NO return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper in my grandfather's handwriting. Not a will, not instructions, just a sentence. You passed the test by not trying to win. That I folded it carefully and placed it inside my father's old book. The board offered me a formal role months later, strategic oversight, advisory authority. That I declined. Instead, I asked for one thing. A scholarship program for kids who worked quietly, who didn't self-promote, who built instead of demanded. They approved it unanimously. That on Sundays, I walked at NO phone at NO noise. That I think about the people who laughed that day in the lawyer's office. They weren't evil. They were distracted. They were watching the wrong board. That my life didn't become extravagant. That IT became intentional. That I still teach, still budget, still drive the same car. But I sleep without pressure now, without pretending. That locked metal box everyone mocked, it was never about what was inside. IT was about who could wait without panicking, who could stand being underestimated, who could carry responsibility without needing credit. My grandfather didn't leave me wealth. He left me the truth. And once you see the truth, money stops being the prize. That if this story reminded you that patience beats noise, that character outlasts ego, and that sometimes the smallest thing holds the biggest lesson, then you already understand the inheritance. Thank you for listening.